Hello all, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale radio controlled Armortek early production Panther Ausf.G. Since the last video update, the model has been painted, weathered, and also has had its markings installed. The model as it sits in this video is about 95% complete and will soon be reaching the completion point. In addition to the paint, the model's fittings as well as tools are starting to be remounted, and which is pushing the model closer to the finish line. We will go over these added details as well as the paint and weathering in this video. As for the model's paint pattern, the model features a 3-tone camouflage paint job. The paint pattern itself is all applied by hand via an airbrush. All the colors feature shading and counter shading, as well as an overall dusting to make the pattern a lot more subtle, as unlike my other vehicles which have the colors that are a lot more vibrant. This model here, the colors are more subdued and blend in with the overall paint. As was mentioned in an earlier video, the Armortek model does come with removable side skirts which lock onto the side fenders as per the real vehicle. I do have these fenders on hand, and these fenders are currently going through the painting process. Once the pattern and weathering have been added, I will take some pictures and throw them up on the Facebook page, as well as for the next video update with them mounted. The model's exhaust system has also been weathered. The smokestacks themselves have their rusting color as well as their grime buildup that was added with the airbrush. For the exhaust rust themselves, I use the Sophisticated Finishes rusting antiquing kit. I use this system on a lot of my other 1/6 scale builds, and I've had some good success with it. The system actually uses real iron and really rusts on the object, giving you for a very realistic appearance. For the model's markings, the model features several types of markings. We have, first on the turret, on either side of the model's turret we have the tank's number, and on the forward corner here on either side of the vehicle we have the cross. On the rear portion of the model we have another cross painted on the right hand side storage bin. As with all of my other 1/6 scale tank builds, the markings are not decals and are instead painted onto the model via homemade stencils. These stencils give a very realistic effect because, just like the real vehicle, the markings are painted on. The numbers feature a hand-painted stroke of white around the red lettering. The red lettering itself was applied on with an airbrush. The stencils that I use are made per each vehicle, and then once the marking is applied, the stencil is then destroyed. They're disposable, and they're only really made for a one-use application. As of note, with these Panthers, the Panthers had a very unique way on the location for the front cross. Unlike Tigers and Panzer IVs, which typically have the cross on the middle or rear quarter portion of the vehicle, on the Panther it's all the way up in the front. And because of the severe front slope, the cross is sectioned as the way it is on this model. Also, since the model is Zemorited, painting on the marking is a little bit more challenging in that you have a lot more nooks and crannies to get the paint into. If you just simply paint it on in one direction, you'll see the pattern, however you will have gaps on the reverse side. This is not only true with the markings, however it's also true with the model's pattern. So if you're painting a model in any scale that it has Zemorite on it, you must make sure that you cover both and all angles so that you get a nice proper application of paint. Something else that was also added to the model was the model's antenna. The antenna itself is not only there for detail purposes, but is actually the antenna that connects to the model's receiver. With the antenna connected to the receiver, the model can now take in radio waves from outside the model. This extends the model's radio range, and if we could recall from my earlier videos, when the model, and I described how the model would stutter and have signal loss occasionally, all those problems are completely eradicated with the installation of the external antenna. And since the antenna is in this portion on the real vehicle. It adds for a nice detail and functionality balance. The antenna base itself is my own casting and is casted on this model in flexible resin. This is done because on the real German tanks, this portion here is molded in rubber and would be flexible. The flexible resin gives it for a very nice realistic appearance and doesn't require any paint. This is the raw material, just like it is on the real vehicle. As we can see, fitted to the mid portion here of the antenna base is a brass mount along with a wing nut fastener. This would unscrew and then would allow you to remove the antenna wire that we have over here, which is connected to the antenna base. Also, as we can notice, the model's tracks have been added. The model's tracks have been repainted. If we recall from the earlier video, they were a dark chocolate brown or rusty brown color. The tracks themselves were repainted with a black or dark gray oxide color that we have here. This color closely matches the color of the real tracks on the real German tanks. As I mentioned in an earlier video, it's a common modeler technique to heavily weather and rust track links. This is, again, as I explained before, this is not necessarily the case in real life, as the type of metal that the track links are made of doesn't rust all that quickly and are actually pretty resilient to weathering. The reason why you'll see a lot of tanks with rusty tracks is either because the vehicle was knocked out and caught on fire, which changes the metal around. Also, the vehicle is possibly at a museum on display and it's been outdoors for 40 or 50 some odd years. The tracks, after repainted, were then refitted to the model and had their track tension adjusted so that when you're driving the model, you don't have to worry about any slippages or any other type of issues because the track tension is set at the perfect length. Another unique feature that I like about these Armortek tanks is because since the model and the track are all made out of metal, you don't have to weather the tracks via dry brushing or anything else to get that scratched steel type appearance. All you need to do is literally paint the track, install to the model, and drive the tank around for a few laps on material such as asphalt or even in the dirt, and you will get the natural weathering like we see here on the ice cleats. We will get that type of weathering naturally as you would just like on the real model. Also, coincidentally, the more you drive the tank around, the more the track will get weathered, which also aids in the simulation of the vehicle. It is also at this stage where I can start remounting the model's Pioneer tools. If we recall, all these tools are from aftermarket sources and were very nice. These tools were removed when the project was first started and placed in a bag. Once the model reaches the point that you see here, it is time to take the tools, paint them, weather them, and get them installed. As we can see, the tools themselves are very weathered and do aid in the look of the model. One modification that was made to the horn over here was that the horn, which was from an aftermarket supplier, is made out of resin. It was nicely done, however, it was that of the Tiger version of the horn, which kind of bent downward over here. However, from some of the sources that I was given with this build, the Panther horn was actually straight and was parallel with the line that you see here. To do that, this horn, both of the horns actually were placed on a mill and the dip bevel was removed. I sanded down the edges to make it blend in with the rest of the horn, and the horn was then painted and weathered and subsequently was installed. The horn itself is kept on via these two retaining chains, and like all the tools on this model, is removable. To reinstall the horn, you simply just line it back up and put the chain retained pins back into their allocated holes. This is done on both sides of the vehicle. Just like with all of the metal components, how they were weathered, the wooden components were weathered as well. These aftermarket wooden handles were very nicely done from the supplier. I believe that they already came pre-stained and tinted, and were ready to go out of the box. However, to weather the handles to make them better match the tool heads, I went ahead and dry brushed some wear onto all the tool handles so that they better match the tool heads, which are severely weathered. This was done to all of the wooden handles, including not only the axe, the shovel, and the sledgehammer. Another surprise that I found while working on the model's tools was that over here, in this location here, this is the mount for the model's jack block. The way this block works is that when you need to jack up the tank, you would simply put this block on the floor or on the tank itself, and when you jack up the jack, the block is at its support, especially if placed on uneven terrain. The jack block itself from the aftermarket supplier is very nice. It's treated wood that has the right bevel and shape to it, and has these metal straps with their rivets onto them. They simply get installed onto the model like so. Fortunately, one mistake that was made, and I stumbled into just recently from the previous builder, was that he mounted this block too high. If we notice, once the block is installed, it sticks above the top deck by a little less than 1/4 of an inch. Because of that, when the turret turns, it will snag the block, causing lots of problems. The only way to fix it, unfortunately, it's too late at this point to rip the mount out and mount it a little bit lower. However, what I am going to do is I'm going to make a new block with the same details on it that is to these dimensions, so that when inserted, the turret will not hit the wood. This will be done by the next video update. On the reverse side of the model, we have some more tools. Over here we have again the hook. Here's the shovel. The shovel itself and the hook are all weathered just to give that realistic look. We have a large pick on the top here of the gun cleaning rod storage tube. And once the model moves on, it will have its spare track links mounted in these racks, as well as a tow cable which run across the top portion here of the side hull, and which will be mounted to this position over here. Another piece of weathering advice that I have is on the model's gun muzzle. I've seen many model makers that commonly over-weather this portion here of the vehicle. This being that of the powder fouling. Just like any other firearm, when the gun goes off, it will leave carbon residue on the muzzle brake. Now, these guns were not only maintained very well in the field by constantly having the barrel swabbed, but the amount of blast that would generate would not necessarily make too much fouling on the muzzle. I've seen some muzzles that have, on some smaller scale builds, that have the powder fouling all the way up the barrel. That's far too excessive and not very realistic. Generally, from what I've seen, these muzzle brakes do build up some powder fouling over here in the baffle area. Here's the muzzle brake from the reverse side, just to show a panoramic view of how I weathered the muzzle brake on this model. In addition to the muzzle brake having its weathering, I added the weathering to the coaxial machine gun. Keep in mind there would be an MG34 in here, and when the gun fires, it would leave some powder fouling around this portion here of the mantlet. While we're on armament, the last bit that was added was a MG34T from DML. The MG34T is different from the standard MG34 in the barrel shroud. On the standard MG34 it has more perforations in it, and on the T version is more tubular and is more as one piece. This version of the MG34 is really designed for armored vehicle use. The gun itself is as is. I didn't make any modifications to it, and the gun came with not only the gun, but it also came with an ammunition can, as well as a Dragon flexible ammo belt that is folded inside the ammo can and placed on the feed tray. The gun is nice in that it also has a spring-loaded cocking feature that we have here. Weathering was also added to the interior portion of the hatches. This would include the radio operator's hatch, the driver's hatch, as well as the rear turret loader's hatch. And that concludes this project update video for this 1/6 scale Armortek Panther Ausf.G. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook. And don't forget to check out eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 scale tank builds, as well as other 1/6 scale detail components. Thank you.